the song
right
ended. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tuesdays in the Shop. I'm Yvette, and this is Jen. Say hi, Jen.
Hi, Jen.
Jen's bandwidth seems to be a little bit awkward, so she's a little fuzzy, so don't mind that.
I'm
But we're
always
here.
awkward.
Sorry?
I'm always awkward.
No, you're delightful. Everybody loves you. Um, Especially when you make jokes I don't understand. So we're Gotham Quilts, and we do this weekly live video to tell you what's going on with us at the store. And this week we are telling you about Jen's next live Zoom class. So Jen, take it over.
All right. The next class that I'm doing this weekend on Sunday, I think, I hope, is
Yes.
Kawandi Style Quilting by Machine. When I started Kawandi Quilting, I think actually the night that we were doing it, in Quilt Stitch Lab. I keep calling it Quilt Lab because it's hard to change.
It used to be Quilt Lab, yeah.
Right. We talked about it and we're like, well, could this be done by machine? Because traditionally it's done by hand. And it can be done by machine. Almost anything you can do by hand can be done by sewing machine if you have the patience. Luckily, this doesn't.
Before you get into that, why don't you tell us what even Kawandi is? I bet you there's plenty of people watching who've never even seen that word before.
To go all the way back.
Mm-hmm.
So Kawandi quilts are they are a traditional craft, and I call them Kawandi quilts, which is actually kind of redundant. Kawandi means quilt in one of the dialects that they use in India. It is a quilting practice from the city quilters who were an African people who were brought to India, and they are in Western India in near Maharashtra and Karnataka on the western edge. They live in the mountainous region, and they're very rural farmers. And the women used recycled sari to make Kawandi. And they start with a solid back. And then here, this one actually is a better representation because this one has the fula. And then they use scraps of sari, and you quilt from the outside in, which is why it was so exciting to me because it's backwards. Usually we quilt from the inside out to chase the fullness away, but in Kawandi, you go from the outside in and just kind of pack it down. And
you're like only quilting, right? You don't do piecing first?
No piecing. You skip the boring part. You don't have to do any measuring. You just skip right to the quilting. And usually it's traditionally done by hand. This one was started on my machine. I did the first row of stitches, you can kind of see on the machine, and then I switched to hand stitching. But if you don't love hand stitching for whatever reason, I love hand sewing, but also I like to go fast sometimes, so I do both. But if you have arthritis or just lack of patience,
like me,
you can do it by machine. So this one has little hula on the end. Not many of my Kawandi do because I have a bit of an anal retentive personality, and these drive me bananas.
And there's no binding either, right?
There's no binding. No, like all the parts that you skip on most projects where you don't, I can't get to the binding. I can't get to this. You just skip it all with Kawandi and go right to the fun.
That's cool.
But with the machine, you can make your rows of stitches really close together because it goes so fast. So where this would probably take me 4 or 5 hours, this would take me less than an hour. And part of that is probably cutting my fabrics out and pressing the edges.
Oh, so you're not just using scraps?
I do use scraps, but sometimes they're too big. Because if you're making, especially something this small, if you use a scrap that's like 4 inches square, it's just going to cover up half of your piece. So I like to use little.
So theoretically, if I did only use 4-inch scraps, would it go faster?
It might, but so I would get. This actually is the first one that I did on the machine. It gets a little bit boring if you line things up. And oh yes, you definitely can combine hand and machine. I've done it. I do it all the time now because there's parts of Kawandi are slower. Like starting the first outer row takes a long time to start by hand, but I start them by machine all the time.
Wait, why?
This
Why
was.
does it take a long time?
Well, because each stitch, every fabric that you put down when you're going around the outside, so you stitch here and then you have to add another piece and then you stitch and then you add another piece. So it's a slow process at the beginning. And
Oh,
that
because none
first,
of the fabrics are already down.
right. So
Like,
you
yep.
it just takes that part is the longest, slowest time. When you do it on machine, you can do that part a lot faster. And then I switched to doing it by hand because it's slower. I haven't done one yet. I really want to do one where I do it by machine with a wider stitch and then go back and do it by hand and just relax.
Oh, like kind of layer some hand quilting and some machine
Yeah.
quilting. I think that sounds great.
Yes. Kathy, I have also just purchased a Baby Lock Sashiko machine and I have not gotten it to work correctly yet. So it
Oh
is,
no.
it's very frustrating. Um,
So
but
for
yes.
those of you who don't know, a Baby Lock Sashiko machine is a machine from Baby Lock, which is a brand that is sort of like a chain stitch machine, if you know what those are, where it was like one thread and it would loop and make just one stitch like that. I know it's not actually a chain stitch machine, the real ones, but that's a way to think about them.
Yeah.
And they make realistic looking big stitch quilting stitches with a gap between each stitch.
I have
I've
a
wanted
sample.
one for years.
Yes, I just got it and I bought a used one and I think it's me, not the machine, but of course I also think it couldn't possibly be me.
Well,
So,
did you actually take the class that they wanted you to take or no?
why would I do
Yeah.
that?
See, this is like typical, like, do what I say, not what I do, right?
Right.
Like, we're the teachers and we're always telling people, like, don't skip that first step, take the
Right.
introduction class, right? And then when it's us, we don't do that.
Yeah, well, and they said,
Anyway,
well, maybe you should wait. And I was like, I'm a professional. Nope,
yeah.
can't work it either. So, yeah,
Oh,
I have to
Kathy's
spend
saying
some,
to look on YouTube for some tutorials for it. That's cool.
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
So
back
I'll
to
be
what we're
bringing
supposed
mine
to be
back to
talking
the
about.
store for a
We're
class.
supposed to be talking about your class.
Oh, yes, yes. Sorry. See, I just go right off the rails. I should stop paying attention to the comments. So this is the size that I do in the class. I suggest everybody start small. This is a placemat. I used to do squares, and then the students would say, "What do you do with all the squares?" And I would say, "I get people to take classes," and they didn't think I was funny at all.
I think
So
that's
now I make
funny.
placemats.
I mean, you can hang a square on the wall, like a mini quilt as a wall
Absolutely. But
hanging. Yeah.
how many wall minis do you need on your wall? So we do the placemat, and there's going to be a range. Some people in class are going to finish one real quick and then do another one because a lot of times, like I explain how you do it, and they just take off. And then some people are going to be struggling, and it's going to be slower. So there's everything in the class, like a range, no matter how many times I do it. But the pattern that comes with the class has the placemat, but it also, I have instructions for a longer one so you can make a matching table runner.
That's great.
Yeah.
And when is the class?
It is Sunday from 10 to 2, I believe. I would
Yes,
have to
it
check
is.
my calendar to be sure.
And that's this Sunday, everybody. So the 23rd,
This Sunday.
if you scan this QR code, or click the link that's in the description, then you'll go straight to our website and it has all the information. This is a class on Zoom that Jen teaches. You're teaching this technique, right? This
It's the first time
variation
I'm
of the
teaching it
technique.
with you guys. I did teach it live. It's the first
What?
time I'm teaching it virtually. I did
Oh,
teach
I
it
see.
live in Lancaster. So
Cool. Yeah. So, like, I don't know if
yeah.
everybody understood that this is something Jen sort of like reverse engineered, right? Like, she's been doing Kawandi more like in the traditional style by hand for years and years and experimenting in different variations of it and techniques. And then at some point somebody said, but can you do it by machine? Because some people really hate working by hand, right? And Jen did a bunch of troubleshooting and figured out a technique to do it by machine. And I think that's really cool, Jen.
It's really fun. And I think, I've gotten a lot of, not a lot, I've gotten a couple of people push back that I'm like ruining it or something, which I always think is pretty amusing because my grandmother sewed and my great grandmother sewed. And as soon as sewing machines were invented and they had the money, they got a sewing machine. I don't think that there's any ruining of tradition. And I'm not pretending that I'm anything other than what I am, which is a sewing enthusiast stealing a technique.
Yeah,
So
and no one's
it's
saying you have to do it this way, right? Like, we're not going to
oh,
show up at your house and handcuff you if you don't do it by machine. This is an option if you want to learn how to do it by machine, right?
absolutely. And I do say there, you know, everybody says there's no quilt police. There are quilt police. We've all met them. I started to be inducted into the quilt police before I decided to take a different path. But there, for sure, there really are no Kawandi police. There's none.
Yeah. Well, there really shouldn't be. And like, this is our
Right.
hobby, right? Why does people seem to really enjoy ruining things for other people? Like, why,
Right.
right? Like, this is fun. This is creative. This is soothing and like self care, right? And like, somebody has to come in and poop on it. Like, no, thank you.
No, and it is a fantastic way to use up your scraps. So if you're interested in the
Yeah.
class and you're worrying that you need to buy something, let me tell you, you do not need to buy anything. If you have a sewing machine and thread and some scrap fabric, we can make this
And
happen.
scrap
There's
batting too, right?
right scrap batting. You can franken batting all you want. I give my students that like, what's your favorite batting? Well, I have a favorite. My favorite is right now. My favorite is silk. Sometimes it's a wool cotton blend. What I usually use is whatever's on the top of the scrap pile.
Right. The
I
one
do
you can
try to
find
keep
the
it to one
fastest.
kind. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I want to get going and let's do this. The other thing I wanted to mention, we won't do this in class, but you can make them bigger by machine. This is the biggest one I've done, and it's a baby quilt, and it's been washed, and you can see it's so floppy, and it's batik. The other thing I like about it by machine is I can go through all my batik scraps, my scraps like white on white with ink and thick dye, the ones
And
that
not
my,
have to worry
my
about
hand
hand
needle doesn't want to
quilting
go
that.
through.
Yeah.
And this is going to be the baby quilt that gets used and dragged around and turned into a real like velveteen rabbit. This is going to get loved someday if the dog doesn't get it first.
Right. And with all that quilting, it's very sturdy, right?
Yes, this is not going to fall apart in the wash. No, this is going to have to get chewed.
Yep. Hey,
Yeah,
Jen,
it's
your internet caught up again. Can you show your samples again? Because now it's more
oh, is it more
in focus.
smooth?
Yeah, I don't know what changed,
Oh,
but your internet's better now.
So this is the back of the big one, and then I have little pieces of it in here, and I pulled the colors. I don't know. So it's all grays. I like gray quilts.
And I can see to use bigger scraps for that large size Kawandi, which makes
Yeah, I
sense, right?
do.
It's a bigger scale, so bigger
Right.
scraps go better, right?
Yeah. Like if you used big scraps, you'd have no motion, nothing going on. So this
Yep.
is the
It'd
table
be a
runner.
little. Yeah.
And you can use up your appalling bits of Cape Facet fabric and get rid of them. So this is the placemat. This is the size we do in class.
Can
And
you hold
again,
it closer so people can see the texture? And here's a question I don't think we covered. For each of those pieces of fabric that you're adding, do you have to baste them? Do you have to stitch through the edges? Like, how do they not unravel?
So they're folded under.
Oh,
So everything is folded under on at least two sides. And, so this one, let's see. This one is folded under where it's on top here. And it's folded under where it's on top there. But where it's under this other piece, it's not folded. It's just kind of sneaked in.
okay. And then the
Yeah.
next layer covers the raw edge.
Right.
That
So
was
you're
left.
one of the fun parts is that you're kind of solving a puzzle as you go along. Like, it's you're just working along. And I do not pin the whole thing down before I get started. I am always working on this piece of fabric and I sew, and then I'm on this piece of fabric. I'm only solving problems as they come up, because to me, it's no fun to pin the whole thing and then just stitch it down.
Do you think that the reason you mentioned that is because somebody must have asked you that, right? Because they're like
A lot of
scared
my
that it's going to
students
turn
do.
out bad?
Yep. So it's not bad. It's not wrong. But to me, the whole fun of the process is watching it evolve. And like, let's see, I don't know that I did it. I did it. I definitely did it on this one. So I will look at my fabrics in my scrap basket. And so as I'm doing this one, like this green one pops up, and then I want to have something that talks to it next to it. Like there's other greens around it. I really spend time thinking about how the fabrics interact with each other. And it may look a little bit chaotic, but a lot of thought did go into them usually.
And
And
do you pre-pull like a selection of fabrics from your stash, or are you always
I
just like
do.
reaching in?
When I'm doing it by machine, I do a lot more prep. I will press the pieces. I will fold under two sides just to make it a little bit smoother of a process. At the machine, you can just pick it up and go. By hand, I don't do as much. Um, but yeah, it's so fun. Like I don't know. I try to maximize the fun of the process for
Yeah.
myself. But students definitely have different opinions of what the process should be for them, and it's great.
Yeah.
You
You
get to
can do
do
whatever you
whatever
want.
you want.
Yep.
You get to
I
hear
always
what I
think,
like best and try your stuff.
yeah, this is to me is like a very low pressure version of improv, right? Like
Oh yeah.
there's no pattern to follow. There's no set idea for what it should look like at the end, just a vague concept, right? Like scraps put together next to each
Yeah.
other and on top of each other. So it's like if you've never done improv and you're intimidated by improv, this might be a good first way to like dip your toes into the idea of working without a pattern and seeing how
Yeah.
it goes and making decisions. It's, I think it's a really cool technique. And
It's a lot of fun, and everybody's always very excited when they see them. The other thing, if you have scraps or orphan blocks in your basket, this is pieced,
oh,
this
hold it
little
up.
guy.
Let me see.
So he's a half square triangle unit that didn't get
Oh,
trimmed or
yeah.
something. So I stick them in. If it's in my bucket, it can go in the Kawandi. I do tend to sort out my colors more now and come up with some kind of color scheme, but I don't I don't make myself crazy. And usually something doesn't fit.
Yeah,
Um,
and if we're thinking of this as like a scrap buster, most of us have more scraps of a certain color than others, right? Like I have no yellow scraps at all, right?
yeah.
So you almost had your own colorway already made before you start.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's super fun to go sifting through your scraps and go, oh, this one is from that challenge. This one is from that bundle. I found this one when I was on vacation. There's a piece of an old shirt. Like I
Yeah.
really like that about this particular thing. And I've always been a scrappy quilter. I find it very hard to make quilts with just a couple of fabrics. So like I was the one that I'm working on now. I don't know how many purple fabrics I had, but I had to go to the store and buy 3 more. Because 60 wasn't enough.
Right, of course. And speaking of fabric, do you generally only use quilting cotton on these or could you use other stuff?
I typically use quilting cotton. However, I do stray. I use linen, I use rayon. I've been using a lot of velvet lately because I have velvet that I
Velvet.
acquired. I don't know how it's gonna wash though. So I'm curious to see. The one that I'm working on now has velvet, silk, all these things that have been laying around, and they're pretty colors and I want to play with them. So there's always a little bit of risk with a bigger one where I experiment. Like it's going to be another few weeks before I can wash it and finish it and find
Right.
out if that was a bad idea.
Yeah. So I guess you'll check back in and tell us if that
Right.
was a
I will
bad
definitely
idea
check back in.
later.
I think it's definitely like I've gotten a lot more relaxed with the idea of what if? Like what if I did this? What if I did that? Well, then the only way to find out is if I try it.
Right. And
So,
especially on a small test piece, right? Like when you're
right, these
learning
are
a
great.
technique, doing something small is a way to try it out, see if you like it before you commit, right? And like you
Right.
probably all know that when you start doing something, you don't do it as nicely. So like I always tell people when you're learning a new technique to take a small project first, because if you do that new technique on a huge project first, you totally can tell which end you started on and which end you finished on, right? Because the beginning will be less consistent than the end.
Yeah, well, I think and with Kawandi too, it seems like the people who try it, they love it or they really dislike it. So
Yeah,
I'd rather have them dislike it on a 12-inch piece and then go on their
right.
merry way than have a huge thing. Like I did a couple of small ones, then I did a big one, and the big one took me 2 years to finish, and that's over there. That was all by hand. I definitely don't think that being this insane is necessarily a good idea for everybody. Although if you
Well,
want to do a big one, we can talk.
you're also a professional quilter, right? So making something that takes you 2 years because you made a bunch of other stuff in between, right?
Yeah, oh,
Like,
yes. And I'm a professional is my battle cry. So that's why I
so
do everything.
Kathy says she knows me and she knows I don't finish anything. So she's like, haha, we don't even finish anything anyway, right? 2 years is nothing. I definitely have quilts longer that you're older than 2 years in progress.
Oh, yeah. I have one in my studio now that's at least 20 years old waiting to be quilted. So
Yeah.
that's fine. But the Kawandi is
Oh,
just such a nice, peaceful process.
yeah. And there's so much stress in our lives now. There's so much awfulness in everything that like taking a moment to just sit and like touch fabric and pretty colors, I think it should count as like, I don't know, self-care or
It's
therapy or
definitely
whatever it
therapeutic.
is, you know.
Yeah. Well, and this one I can guarantee you will have at least one finished placemat by the end of class. Like no questions, it'll be done. Um,
And if
but
you
I
don't want to
saw
use it
some.
as placemat, it could be a baby doll quilt for a doll.
Yep.
It could be a pad for your cat, you know, like
I
hang
can
it on
tell
the
you the
wall.
dachshunds, miniature dachshunds, love them. I love them, love them. Um, but the best thing you need to finish one and then you need to throw it into the washing machine right away and then into the dryer because
So you can really feel it. Yeah.
so this one is just quilted. This hasn't been washed because this is a sample. This one is washed and it is so rumply and crinkly. If you're a fan of the crinkly old quilt, you are going to love this because they
Go like
crinkle.
this, like with the two of them, so we can see the texture. Yeah, that's like nice and floppy.
Yeah. And then this one is so stiff.
Yep, you can totally tell.
But like once I wash it, all that will go away. But this is because, I also don't pre-wash my fabric. So this is not pre-washed fabric. And it's the artisan cottons are a little bit thick, so they're heavy. And I'm sure this was a warm and natural batting because I have so much warm and natural scrap and I gotta get rid of it.
I got a
So it goes
weird question. Could you do it without a backing? Sorry, without batting? So
yeah,
it would be a
absolutely.
backing and then just the pieces on top. So if you wanted a very lightweight one,
You could, and the Kawandi, I bought 2 pieces from India, and they don't have any kind of filling in them.
oh,
Part of that, though, is they used to use kind of rags in the center, but now they just the ones that they make for export, there's nothing in the center.
so they are more lightweight.
Yes, they are more lightweight. They're still pretty heavy because there's a lot of overlap of the fabric, but yeah, they're definitely lighter. I was kind of surprised, and I haven't like taken any stitches out, but I definitely am like in there.
Andrea's asking if it's hard to keep it square if you started out with a square piece.
Yes, it is very hard to keep them square.
So
I
like
don't try very hard. Yeah, they're squarish. So they usually are pretty close to whatever the batting starts out as. However, I am not as careful as I could be trying to get it perfectly square because I don't care about that. Sometimes I call them my permission quilts. I have permission to just do whatever I want.
I
Like
like that.
sometimes my stitching cross, which is definitely not the right way to do it, but there's no right way. So, you know.
Yeah. All right.
But yeah, no, it is hard to keep them square, which is why people ask me if they can sew if they can sew little ones into a big one. And I would say on mine, no, I probably could not because I could not get them to fit together.
Well, but if you
However,
were going to sew them to each other, you could first trim them because you'll have a seam holding the edges together.
I think it depends on how you decide to do it. There's lots of different ways to do quilt as you go. I haven't had any interest in trying because to me, I'd rather have fun making a big one.
I now
But it's
want to try
definitely
it.
an
You want to
option.
give me a couple of ones you don't like that much, and I'll cut them up and try to sew them back together and see what happens.
Oh, I can definitely give you a couple. Probably not the handmade ones because I think if you cut through the stitches, it will be more of a problem.
Interesting.
So,
All right. This
Yeah, I
could
don't
be
know
like
how I
the
think
third variation or the 16th variation that we come up with for
my
Kawandi
friend
style.
Lissa is working on a big one made out of little ones. So I keep
Oh
telling
yeah.
people to follow Lovingly Lissa to see what she's doing. And I keep asking her, but now she has to move and sell her or buy a new house. So the
Yeah.
timeline's been moved back.
What was I about to
So,
say? Oh, I know. Let's say again when the class is meeting so that if
okay,
people
so it's
joined us late, they missed the beginning. So
Sunday from 10 to 2 Eastern time. If you are
right.
in a different time zone, please Google it. Don't ask me because I will give you the wrong answer almost every time. I don't
Yeah,
understand
we're
time
all
zones.
terrible at time zones. There's computers for a reason.
Right? Yeah. Google is your friend. Um, yeah.
And
So
this is
Kathy's
a
saying you wouldn't
Zoom
need to start.
class, which is why we're
Yes,
talking
Zoom
about time
class. You will
zones.
get the link.
So you can join us from anywhere.
Yes, you will get the link on Saturday.
And is it recorded or not
And I
recorded? That's
definitely
always a
recommend.
question we get.
Oh, my classes are recorded and I'll leave it up for a month or so until I remember, until Zoom tells me they're going to make me pay more money, then I take it back down.
So that means if something happens and you have to miss the live class, you could at least watch the replay and you haven't missed out on everything.
Absolutely. And if there's anything that, if you miss it and you have questions afterwards, I am happy to stop folding laundry or making dinner or washing dishes, whatever it is that I'm doing. I would be happy to stop doing that and help you. Like I'm here for you
Yeah, they can just
and
send us an
not
email.
housework.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or that.
All right. So if anybody has any other questions about the Kawandi by Machine class, please go ahead and put them in the comments and we'll get to them. Now we're going to switch topics slightly and we're going to go back to what we talked about last week. What? Did I forget something? Oh, yeah, that's what we're going to talk about next. So I'm switching the QR code on the screen to the QR code that you would scan and then enter your email address for if you want to enter to win the thing Jen is holding up. So these are called color card decks, and they are helpful for picking out coordinating colors and like shades of colors. And if you want to see us really dive into how you use them, watch the previous video in our stream. So if you're on YouTube, go to Tuesdays in the Shop and look at the previous one. If you're on Facebook, you look on our page for the previous stream, like on the feed on the page. And we're giving one of these away to one lucky winner. All you have to do to enter is scan this QR code, go to our website, and put your email address into the form at the bottom of the page. And please do not respond to anyone talking to you about a giveaway. Giveaways on social media are the number one way people get scammed. There's like entire companies that do nothing but try to scam people who are giving away something on the internet. We will never message you ever on social media or email or anything to ask you to join or to sign up, or we are not going to ask you your credit card number. We're not going to ask you, I don't know, your social security number. I don't know what the scammers actually ask you for, but just ignore anybody who sends you a message. It is not us. No matter how convincing they make it sound, it is not us. The only way to enter is to scan this QR code and put your email address in the field at the bottom of the page. And you must enter by midnight tomorrow night to be eligible to win. Did I cover everything about that?
I think so. I think so.
Yeah. All
They
right,
are
cool.
fun.
So yeah, and like Jen has to show because I don't have mine any yet. I ordered one, but it hasn't come yet, so I can't even hold one up for you. But yeah, these are very cool, and go back and watch our previous video on it to learn how it works. If you scan the QR code, the video is on that page too, so you don't even have to find it.
Yeah. The hardest part is after you use it, put the cards back in order. Or at least close to an
That's
order.
Yeah, so with the other color deck, I already screwed up the order, and I'm gonna have to sit down and actually like put them in order because everyone knows I never put anything away, right? So it's like, yeah. But this color deck has numbers on each one and they relate to each other. So if you don't put them back in order, you're gonna go crazy trying to find the correct one. Yeah.
Yeah. I figured out today when I was trying to shoot the other video that mine were out of order. And I was like, well, when did I do this? I had it open for 5 minutes and then I just shoved them all back in there. So I put
Yep.
them back in order.
Sounds familiar. In other housekeeping news that we did ship out all the orders from over the weekend from Jen's 29th birthday sale. Haha. And so everyone got your tracking number and everything. You should have your goodies soon. And I think maybe that's it for now. We have the Sylvia So Along starting soon. We have the Zoo Family Lock of the Month starting soon. We're about to announce something else kind of cool. So keep up with us. If you haven't signed up for our email list yet, that's always the best way to find out what's going on. We always tell the email list first. So sign up if you haven't yet, and we will see you next week at the same, what's that phrase? It's like same bat time, same bat place. She's looking at me like she has no idea what I'm talking about.
I'm not sure which joke you're trying to make, but that might
I don't
be
know
something.
either. Yeah. Like I have like vague memories of things that were jokes when I was a child, and then I don't know where they came from, Anyway, that is not what the point of this. Jen, do you have anything else you'd like to say? Oh, see, Andrews knew what I was talking about.
Yeah,
Same
Andrews
bat
says
time,
it.
same bat place.
Oh,
Look,
same
all the
bat
comments
channel.
knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I must have
guess it
missed
was
that one. I was more of a Superman girl.
TV show
Probably.
thing.
I'll ask my husband. He knows everything.
Yeah. So I don't know that I even watched Batman, but I somehow have that like thing in my head. Same bat time, same bat channel. Anyway, so thanks for joining us for another Tuesdays in Shop. We'll be back next week. What are we talking about next week? I don't remember. It'll be fun though, I promise. Let us know if you need anything. You can always email us. It's info@gothamquilts.com. And have a good night. Thank you, Jen.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes, too young because I'm only 29.
Yes, again. Good night.